So before I get started with this review, I just wanted to give a small message to my audience, and that is to say thank you so much. This one will specifically be a special video because, as of right now, my channel has currently reached 100 subscribers. And I'll be honest with you guys, I know that may not seem like a lot, but I will not lie to you. When I first started this channel, I never even thought I'd reach that high. I don't know what I did to have so many of you all following me already, but I hope I can continue to impress you all with the content that I provide. And again, I cannot tell you how grateful I am. Like, honestly, every time I look at my channel and see that subscriber count, I'm left just completely shocked and happy and honestly just almost on the verge of tears. Because, like I said, I never thought I'd reach this far of a landmark. But I hope I can continue to do so for all future content for all of you. With that said, let's get started, shall we? So one thing you all should know about me is that I am a huge fan of vampires. A lot of the series that I have read have involved very cool interpretations of vampires. For instance, you have the classic manga of Hellsing, which features, of course, a spin-off of Bram Stoker's Dracula. We have Warhammer 40,000, which has the Blood Angels, aka space vampires. And of course, we have the up-and-coming author River Isabel Polsgrove with their series of The Dead Souls, with their first book of Death to the Soul already out. This book, however, brings absolute shame to all other fantastic vampire series. So to tell you guys the truth, I never would have picked up Twilight of my own accord. Not the least of which just because of the fact that I did not like their interpretation of vampires, but also because it's a book series built for young girls. But to tell you the truth, after being challenged to read this by a friend of mine, and after reading it myself, I can safely say that I've absolutely grown to detest this book. And not just because of the way that it portrays vampires, and not even for the fact that it's for young teen women, but mostly as a story, as a book itself, from a reader. I found it very long, very droll, with poor execution, very thin characters, and not to mention, it was just flat out boring. I'm not kidding you guys when I say I got 2/3 of the way through this book, and the final third of the book is where it finally picked up on my interest. The first 2/3 of this story was myself forcibly dragging myself through this book to finish it. And there were a lot of times I wanted to throw it out a window. Kind of like how Matt Smith threw out the butter dish in Doctor Who, loudly proclaiming, "And stay out!" That is how I feel regarding this book. But to tell you the truth, after reading it, I could see why it appealed to the young women. But I will say this now. This does not feature a good romance at all. It doesn't feature a healthy romance. And quite frankly, it is piss poor when it comes to vampires. For one, yes, I get it. In this story, vampires are supposed to be like either following the rules or just trying not to drink down human blood, or at least that's the Cullen way of doing it. Other vampires, not so much. They will still suck down on human blood. But just the way they are portrayed as... Here's my biggest issue. A lot of the vampire stories I have read have kept the vampires, at the very least, humane. Like, there are traits about them that keep them grounded or human. The vampires in Twilight, however, are not that. They feel otherworldly, like they do not belong in this world, like they are something outside of the normal human reality. which does not make them relatable whatsoever. It doesn't keep them grounded. So, to put it simply, this story is about young Bella Swan moving away from Phoenix, Arizona to live in Forks, Washington with her father Charlie after her mother has just recently gotten remarried to a minor league baseball player. Why she chose to move to a place that she hates, I will not understand that. I really don't. Like, it demonstrates that in the first chapter, she's talking about how she wants her mother to be happy and all that stuff. Like, she can tell she does not feel happy having to be away from her new husband. And I get that. But why on God's green earth would you move to a place that you knew you hated? I don't get it. Is there supposed to be some kind of brave sacrifice element to this? Because I didn't feel that. I just felt like this was just inconveniencing herself, or at least trying to play the sacrificial piece. But it just felt hollow. I don't even lie, it felt hollow, like there was no real consequence. It was just her moving to a place she hated, of her own accord, mind you. And yet throughout the book, we are forced to listen to her talking about how much she hates Forks. She doesn't like the weather there, having to deal with the constant ice and all that stuff, having to deal with all the rain, how there's like barely any sunshine or anything like that. Yeah, we get it. Forks is depressing. Drive on. You chose to go there. And that's just the beginning of my frustrations with this character of Bella. Like, as soon as she meets Edward Cullen in school, she sees the whole family of Cullens and how they just stand out as these ethereal beings who look like they belong on magazine covers or whatever. Literally, the whole focus is just like that. Love at first sight. Everything is focused on Erin. There is not anything building up with her relationships in school, nothing. It's just her constantly being annoyed with some of her classmates when they all like her, but she does not like them back, and she keeps trying to turn them down. It's like, whoop-de-doo. Some of these guys actually seem pretty decent, and you just turn them down because you want to go for the pretty boy. Talk about your first priorities, huh? But at first, Edward gives off the impression that he does not like her, and he tries to stay away from her completely, or at least giving off the aggressive tones, which at that point you'd think would give Bella the idea, hey, maybe I should stay away from this guy. But then not after that, shortly, Edward comes back and he's completely chill with her, which we eventually learn the reason as to why. But honestly, Edward and Bella, I'll get more on that in a bit. But for now, it essentially shows them trying to grow closer together, with Bella pursuing her curiosity about Edward, wanting to know about the boy. And then coming to find out there was a whole lot more to him, despite his weird behaviors. And she eventually does figure it out after going on a lake trip with a few of her classmates and meeting Jacob Black. And Jacob Black tells her the story of the Cold Ones, also known as vampires, who've been around apparently since the days of Noah's Ark, somehow surviving that whole experience and continuing to live on the earth despite all of that. And I'm just sitting here reading this wondering, how would they have survived the flooded earth? I don't get that at all. I really don't. But that's just the beginning of my frustrations. Honestly, throughout this book, again, we see Edward and Bella constantly interacting, with Edward continuously trying to warn Bella to stay away from him, only for him to disregard his own advice and continuously pursuing her despite that. Like, really, dude? Sending off the mixed signals there? Really? Like, you keep telling this woman you need to stay away from me for your own good, but then you actively pursue her. Like, make up your mind. What is it that you want? But again, it literally took 2/3 through this book, literally on the last few hundred or so pages, where it finally got interesting when Bella was being pursued by a vampire that actively drank human blood. That is where it finally got interesting. However, here's one major issue that I have with this whole thing. They essentially tell her, hey, you've got to run from this place and run down to Phoenix again. And I'm like, wait. You're essentially telling her she has to leave the country, or at least leave the state. For what? Like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you all could probably take down this guy, who's essentially a tracker, as they describe him. So the tracker ends up following them all the way to Phoenix anyways, making the effort a little bit pointless. But this was actually where it finally got interesting for me, and it actually managed to grab my attention around this part. See, I get it. Twilight is meant to be more of a romance than a supernatural thing, but you need to incorporate something to keep the audience's attention, instead of it being 100% on Edward and Bella. Which I did like this last third of it, to a certain degree. It was nice to actually see a bit of action here, some danger to this world, finally. So throughout it all, Bella is being tracked by this other vampire all the way to Phoenix, and it actually leads her into a trap, where at one point, during this confrontation with the tracker, after being trapped by him, and I'm going to tell you right now, this tracker was definitely something else. He wanted to record himself feeding on Bella just to give it to Edward, just to spite him, just to taunt him for denying this tracker a taste of Bella's blood in the first place. I'm like, really? Okay then. But then during this confrontation, the vampire actually manages to get a slice or a bite on Bella, and Bella starts becoming infected with the vampire illness, only for Edward to just suck out the poison. Yeah, okay. That I can understand. And then we cut to the hospital, where Bella is severely injured, being looked after, and despite everything shown to the contrary, despite how her danger senses should be going off at this point, that hey, maybe I should stay away from this guy, she still actively wants to pursue a relationship with Edward, despite the dangers that she just found herself in. And if anything, the whole argument between them in the hospital bed, where she is essentially telling him, hey, why don't you just make me a vampire too? To which he responds, no, you don't want this life. And she was like, I'm pretty damn well sure I do. And I'm just sitting there like, yeah, I probably would have solved this whole conflict within just one single book. Just make Bella a vampire. There you go, problem solved. And frankly, again, like I said, I found this book very, very dry. It was very long, dragged out, and it kept dancing around the issues between Edward and Bella. It kept dancing around it for just the sheer sake of drama, of will they get together, won't they get together, but it's kind of obvious that they will get together. But essentially all the mixed signals that kept being portrayed here, like Edward essentially kept telling Bella, hey, you need to stay away from me, it's not safe for you, only for him to continuously pursue her because he's fascinated by her. But one of the things I did not like was when Bella is essentially having to run to the other country, she and her father get into an argument where she has to essentially play out a part of just running away back to Phoenix. Like, yeah, sure, I get that, but you could really say to, hey, I want to go and visit my mother here pretty soon, or at least wait in Phoenix for her. But then here's what I don't like. She essentially decides to break her father's heart by repeating the very same words that her mother said to Charlie right as she left. And I'm like, okay, really? I get that you're in a hurry, that you're trying to get away from this tracker that might be after you here pretty soon, but did you really have to go and break your father's heart like that? Seriously, like, was that necessary? I'm just left there befuddled, like, really? Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the main couple here. Now, as for our main couple here of Edward and Bella, there are a lot of issues I have with this couple. First of all, this is not a great example of a healthy relationship. First of all, there is like barely any communication between these two, first off. Secondly, Edward's attitude towards her. He treats Bella like a child, which I get it. He is older than her, but physically 17. But the fact that you continuously overpower her decisions with your own makes it come off that you do not view her as an equal. You view her as a child. Not to mention the mixed signals. Again, I don't get that. He keeps telling her, you've got to stay away from me for your own safety. I'm not safe to be around. And even then, after getting the snot beaten out of her, Bella still wants to continue the relationship. She still wants to be with this guy. Instead of saying, hey, maybe he's right. Maybe I need to keep my distance for my own safety and physical preservation. But no, she still chooses to go after him. Why? Because apparently he's handsome. And that brings me to another problem here. Again, the zero communication. Most of the time, their interactions throughout the book, it's all based around physical attraction. It's like, yes, we get it, he's attractive, can you all just talk more? Which they do, but at the same time, it feels dry. It feels like there's not really a whole lot of connection there. Like, they don't talk about hobbies or nothing. They do not connect with another means. It's mostly just talking about how Edward is a vampire and how Bella is attracted to him, which we get it. We get he's not of this world, but can you actually, like, talk to him more? Can you two, like, communicate or whatever? Not to mention, here's another thing with Edward. First of all, Edward is just plain creepy. First of all, we come to find out that Edward is a mind reader. First of all, he has a special ability where he's able to gain glances of a person's thoughts. And yet with Bella, he can't do that, which is one of his biggest founding pieces as to why he's fascinated by her, why he wants to pursue her, because he cannot read her mind. He cannot read her thoughts. And I'm like, okay, you're saying that's a reason to be interested in this woman? That you can't read her mind? First of all, violating people's privacy. First of all, by reading their innermost thoughts. Yeah, great to know that you're doing that. Secondly, I feel as though there's a hypnotic part to this, because every time they've mentioned Bella looking into his eyes, she's always mesmerized. I feel like that's some kind of partial hypnosis there. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Or it could be she's just mesmerized by his fabulous eyes. Yeah. Woman, you need to get your priorities straight. Secondly, the age gap here between them feels extremely uncomfortable. Like, we know apparently that Edward was turned sometime in the 1900s when he was dying of an illness, but he physically looks 17. And yet the way he acts far older than her. He does not connect like a 17-year-old. He does not act like one. He acts way older for his age, which I know you all are going to say, yeah, because he is technically older than Bella. That does not mean he needs to treat Bella like a child. And another thing, the stalking people. First of all, the fact that he somehow managed to follow Bella to another town entirely and just happened to be there to save her from a bunch of crooks. Yeah, a little bit too convenient there, folks. And then he drives her back home, like, no problem. And yet, here's the major issue I have, is him sneaking over to her house and watching Bella while she sleeps. Like, seriously, looking through her window and watching Bella while she sleeps for hours, because apparently he doesn't need to sleep. So he just decides, oh, maybe I'll just go and watch this girl while she sleeps. Does that not ring any alarm bells for you guys? Literally, this whole relationship is centered around a young woman being interested in an older man who is consistently stalking her. That doesn't ring any alarm bells in your all's heads? So the funny thing is, you guys, I compare these two works because they are very similar and yet very, very different. Twilight and Death to the Soul. And here's a fun fact for this. Twilight itself has about 498 pages, literally a 500-page book, compared to Death to the Soul, which has only 214. And yet, Death to the Soul, despite having half of the page count that Twilight has, managed to write a more cohesive story that was far more engaging and characters that actually felt grounded and relatable. Especially our main character, Quinn and Rianne. The fun fact is, they actually had personality, unlike Edward and Bella, who felt absolutely dry. Like, Bella herself felt like a very dry and bland character, and Edward himself is just a creepy stalker. I am not letting that go. Whereas, to compare, Quinn and Rianne feel far more human. We feel more relatable to them, especially with how they are written. I will leave a link to R. Pulsgrove's Death to the Soul in this video for you all to go ahead and check it out. But let's move on to the rating. You all are already knowing what I'm going to give this one. So all in all, I'm giving Twilight a 3 out of 10 for a lot of reasons. First of all, it literally took you all the final third of the book to actually grab my interest. Secondly, boring characters or just straight up creepy characters that set up alarm bells all throughout my skull. Third, completely dry execution. I felt like I was dragging my feet through this whole book. It felt like a slog through a murky swamp. All in all, I do not recommend this one, whether as a romance story or even as a vampire story. I do not recommend this one whatsoever. And I can tell you right now, you guys, there are tons of greater vampire stories out there that I do recommend. Anyways, you guys, thank you all again for listening. And for those of you who stuck around to the end of this video, I just want to say again, thank you again for listening. And just have an awesome day. And let me know if you guys have any other challenges for me, will you? I always enjoy a good challenge. See you all again in the next video. Have an awesome day.